Ugh. All this FOMO around missing ScotiaCon is driving me mad. I've got to do something to take my mind off it. Maybe a nice anthro movie will help me feel better. No. Oh, whoa, what's this? Well, that's something I haven't watched in a while. Maybe the soft, warm blanket of nostalgia will help me feel better. I had genuinely forgotten how well produced that movie was. Oh, and they have the Cosgrove Hall series on here. Maybe I'll watch a couple of episodes. You know, that was as good as I remember. Maybe I should watch a few more. Wow. Wow! And title drop. I'm not crying. I'm not crying! Oh, Toad, will you ever learn? Wait a minute. Did I just watch the whole series? And I feel like I didn't waste a single minute. Hello Internet, and welcome to another edition of Furry Fandom Stories. I'm Sandy Brushtail. Now, I know I've gone on a lot about Redwall on this channel and how much it was my gateway to the wider furry fandom, but before that, there was another book called Wind in the Willows. Originally published back in 1909, Wind in the Willows was written by former Bank of England Secretary Kenneth Grahame. It originally began as a collection of bedtime stories Grahame told to his son Alastair, so the book itself reads more like an anthology of short stories rather than an actual novel. Wind in the Willows is a story of friendship and camaraderie set against a backdrop of the South English countryside. The story has been adapted for the stage. There have been many animated film adaptations, even a few live action movie adaptations. It's also had radio plays, TV specials, and new editions of the book are still being printed even to this very day. But the version I would like to share with you is the made-for-TV production produced by Cosgrove Hall back in 1983. The version of the story I grew up with. It became so popular with audiences that it won a BAFTA and an International Emmy Award. Premise and main characters. Wind in the Willows revolve around the adventures of a close-knit group of friends that take place in the countryside of southern England. There is the shy and introverted Mole, played by the late Richard Pearson, poet, waterways and boating enthusiast Ratty, who is voiced in the TV special by Ian Carmichael, but in the TV series is voiced by the late Peter Sallis, yep, the voice of Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. Stern but fair, but doesn't suffer fools gladly, Badger, voiced by the late Sir Michael Hordern. And of course, there's the hyperactive, eccentric, more money than common sense, Mr. Toad, voiced by the one and only Sir David Jason OBE. Recurring characters include the Wildwood Weasels, whose chief is also voiced by Sir David Jason, and also there's his downtrodden dog's body, Bert Weasel, who is voiced by the late Brian Truman. Other recurring characters include Otter and his young son Portly, and Mole's reoccurring cousin Oberon. Many of these voice actors would go on to be deeply involved with other works produced by Cosgrove Hall Productions. Sir David Jason was the voice of Danger Mouse and Count Duckula, and Brian Truman also was the voice of Nanny in Count Duckula. Animation! The main misconception that people have about the production of this series is that it was made using the process of claymation, the same animation process that Aardman Films uses when they create Wallace and Gromit. But this isn't the case, because the animators at Cosgrove Hall found that using clay was so fiddly that instead the figures first started off as wire frames, kind of like an endoskeleton. And their features and body parts were moulded out of latex rubber and then put on top of these metal frames. The main thing you've got to remember is that no CGI or no computer effects was used in the production of this series. Everything you see is miniature and model work filmed on physical sets. Effects were predominantly made using different camera lenses and set lighting. The Cosgrove Hall adaptation was first broadcast on the ITV affiliate Thames Television on December the 27th, 1983. It would serve as an unofficial pilot for an upcoming TV series. So let's all settle down by the fire with some nice sweet tea and some crumpets. This is Wind in the Willows.
We're down dabbling, up tails all high.
We begin with the character Mole at his home, Mole End, when he's trying to make some home improvements. When he becomes frustrated with work, Mole decides to take a short walk to clear his head. When walking by the river, he runs into his friend Ratty, who invites him for a small picnic further along the river. Being an introverted fellow, Mole does become a little overwhelmed by the world around him, and Ratty suggests that they go and see his friend Toad, who lives in the big manor house not far from them. When they arrive at Toad Hall, Toad explains he's preparing for a road trip in his horse-drawn caravan. He tries to convince Mole and Ratty to come with him. Ratty is a bit uncertain, but Mole convinces him to come along. Seeing as he feels more at home on the waterways, Ratty is quite dismissive until they find an empty meadow to spend the night. On their way back to Toad Hall, the caravan is run off the road by someone driving a car. While Mole and Rat are trying to salvage what's left of Toad's caravan, Toad is mesmerised by what he's seen.
That is the only way to travel. Woohoo! Here today, in next week tomorrow. Boop, boop.
Now, Toad.
Boop, 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 boop.
If you're familiar with the story, you know what's coming next. There's a slight jump forward in time and we cut to Mole and Rat in Rat's house by the river. Mole is worried about Toad's reckless driving and asks Ratty if there is anybody who can help. Rat suggests the only animal who could turn Toad's life around is Badger, but seeing as he and Toad's father were at university together. Mole wants to go see Badger as soon as possible, but Ratty explains that he lives in the wild wood and it would be a very bad idea to go out there before nightfall. Soon, Rat drifts off to sleep, and Mole takes it upon himself to venture out alone. On the fringes of the wildwood, Mole asks a weasel the way to Badger's set. The weasel gives Mole bad directions on purpose, and he is stalked and harassed by the wood's inhabitants. Rat wakes up to discover Mole absent, and reads the note he left behind. Rat then gears up and heads out to the wildwood to find his friend. The weasel who misled Mole tries the same trick of Ratty, but he takes no guff from weasels. Soon, Rat finds Mole face down in the snow and helps his friend. But as soon as they start to leave, Mole discovers something strange.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
What happened?
I fell over that door scraper.
Door scraper? That's funny.
It didn't feel funny.
Mole! Here's a doormat.
A doormat?
Help me clear this away. It's our last chance.
Mole and Ratty knock at Badger's door and ask him for shelter for the night. They both tell Badger about Toad's antics and hope that an intervention might be what the situation calls for. The next day, all three of them go to Toad Hall and try to reason with Toad to not act so recklessly. But when Toad initially refuses, Badger tries a one-on-one intervention, but this still doesn't work. Badger thinks the best way to deal with Toad would be to lock him in his bedroom so they can keep a closer eye on him. Let me speak directly for a moment. After watching Toad's mannerisms and witnessing his sudden change in personal hobbies, I think that Toad might be suffering from ADHD. Also, I think it would be a safe bet to say that Toad might also be on the autistic spectrum. Well, take me for example. I mean, I had a reputation for having an intense passion for hobbies and interests, but just as sudden as this passion would come about, it would also fizzle out too. So when I first discovered the furry fandom, I was saying, hey, look at this new thing that with all these interesting people, I think I might become more involved with it. Many of my close friends were actually quite dismissive. They were of the mentality of, Oh, here he goes again. Another flippin' interest that he's going to devote all of the time and attention to, but then he'll just lose interest and he'll just move on to something else. I give it a month. But if you're somebody on the autistic spectrum, these deep interests and passions can turn into lifelong hobbies. And seeing in the following TV show that Toad did not give up his joy for motoring, might also seem to suggest that Toad might also be on the autistic spectrum. Well, that's what I think anyway. Anyway, back to the movie. As the trio try to keep Toad on a short leash, he escapes his room and avoids Rat and Mole long enough to make it to the main road, where he flags down another motorist and asks for help. But as the motorist and his partner step out of the car, Toad hops in and takes the car for a joyride. Whilst out looking for Toad, Ratty gives up and talks about going back to his home. But Mole then becomes homesick and longs to go back to his burrow. Rat asks if he could come back to Mole's place, and Mole anxiously agrees. When they arrive, Mole despairs at the state he left his home in, but Rat reassures him that he doesn't mind. Then Mole hears carol singers and worries that he has nothing to give them. But after some sorting in his kitchen, Rat and Mole are ready to receive them. When sharing some food with the youngsters, Rat and Mole learn that Toad has been arrested for theft and dangerous driving. We then cut to the courtroom where Toad is sentenced.
Well, ma'am, you might give 12 months for the theft. Which is mild. And 3 years for furious driving. Which is lenient. And 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek. Namely, calling him Fat Face. That adds up to 19 years. 19 years? And another year for being green. 20 years.
Now, in the book, Mole and Ratty find out about Toad going to prison through some other means, and whilst Toad is in prison, some events do happen to Mole, Ratty and Badger. But it seems whenever there is an adaptation of the story, these chapters seem to be left out altogether, feeling that they add nothing to the overarching plot. And also makes the feel of the book change from a novel to more of an anthology, because these chapters appear more episodic. In fact, in modern day editions of the book, one chapter in particular seems to be left out altogether. So here's a tip if you actually want to pick up a copy of Wind in the Willows in print. Check to see if the copy you're picking up is the complete version or the abridged version, because the abridged version will have some of the chapters missing. But I digress. With Toad in prison, Badger, Rat and Mole decide to be the custodians of Toad Hall. Little do they know the weasels of the Wild Wood, who have envied the Toad estate for years, now see an opportunity to take it over. One night, whilst Badger is watching over the hall, half a dozen weasels, including their chief, accost Badger and throw him out into the cold night. Meanwhile, in prison, Toad befriends the daughter of his jailer, who takes pity on him and comes up with a plan to escape. She disguises Toad as her Aunt Maud, who works in the prison's laundry room to sneak past the guard. You know, if this book was released today, J.K. Rowling's head would explode. However, it doesn't take long for Toad to be discovered missing, and he is pursued by the prison guards, the police, the magistrate, and even the owner of the car he stole. After persuading a train driver to let him board his engine, Toad widens the gap between him and his pursuers. When the driver notices they're being followed, Toad tells him the truth about who he is and why he's being chased. The train driver takes sympathy on Toad, who slows down the engine for him to jump off safely. On his way back to Toad Hall, Toad stops by Ratty's river house, and it's here Rat and Mole give him the bad news about Toad Hall, while a battered and bruised Badger thinks up of a plan. As Badger looks over the old plans of Toad Hall, Mole is sent out in the washerwoman's garb to spy on the weasels and spread misinformation about a mob coming to take back the hall. Badger explains this means less weasels inside Toad Hall, and with the doors locked, the sentries will be kept outside. To solve the riddle of how they get inside the hall undetected, Badger shows a secret escape tunnel that was built at the time of Toad Hall construction. All four of them decide to use the tunnel the night that the Chief Weasel is hosting a banquet in honour of their victory. As they reach the end of the tunnel, Toad asks about the others Mole spoke of. In truth, there are no others. So Toad, Ratty, Badger and Mole then come out of the secret tunnel, and a fight breaks out in Toad's Hall's banqueting hall. Toad makes a flying leap and gets caught in one of his chandeliers. Badger lets freedom ring with a blast from his blunderbuss as Ratty challenges the Chief Weasel to a duel, and Mole goes bonkers with a cricket bat. As the fight goes on, Badger knocks out some weasels with his bare paws, Mole hits weasels with anything that comes within reach, and Rat proves he's more than handy with a sabre. Toad has his moment as he falls from the chandelier right on top of the Chief Weasel. The weasels are evicted, Toad is reinstated back at his home, and the movie pretty much ends there. Apart from a semi-epilogue at the end where Toad has developed a new passion: aviation. And that was the Cosgrove Hall adaptation of Wind in the Willows. And after watching it again, there are quite a few issues I do want to bring up. First, Toad was never paroled or pardoned. He escaped from prison. Technically, he's still on the run. And just the fact that the Cosgrove Hall TV series picks up immediately after when the book ends and the police don't come knocking at Toad Hall, I find that a little bit too convenient. Secondly, after watching it in high definition, some technical setbacks do show themselves. In the later seasons, you can see the guide pins in the spectacles for Mole and Badger that keep them in place on the model during filming. And Toad's model had to be repainted halfway through season 3.
Remembered fondly.
After the broadcast of a TV special, ITV commissioned Cosgrove Hall to produce an entire series that ran for 4 seasons. And Sir David Jason's portrayal of Mr. Toad proved to be so popular that the 5th season was treated like a Toad-centred spin-off show. The opening titles were changed and the Wind in the Willows moniker was dropped altogether in favour of the new title, Oh Mr. Toad. Toad even got his own made-for-TV movie where his exact double teams up with the Weasels to take Toad Hall. On IMDb, Wind in the Willows comes in with an average of 7.9 out of 10 rating. And the highest ranked episode has an overall rating of 8.9 out of 10. And the Toad-centric spin-off movie, A Tale of Two Toads, has a rating of 9.1. In the pre-pandemic days of 2019, a group of British animation fans got together to preserve Cosgrove Hall Productions' legacy. The Cosgrove Hall Film Archive was taking shape in 2019, but the following year the pandemic put the brakes on those plans, but it didn't stop them completely. Today in 2026, the Cosgrove Hall Film Archive has found a permanent home at the Waterside Arts Centre in Trafford. And keeping in line with this video, in 2019, the archive itself came into possession of 26 of the original latex figures and set props from the filming of Wind in the Willows. However, due to the way that these figures were stored, quite a few of them have started showing signs of advanced decay. You can see where the metal underframes have started rusting and that rust has started to bleed out into the latex. If you would like to see the figures in more detail, I'll leave a link to the CHFA blog down in the doodly-doo of this video. But just remember, the reddish-brown markings on the figures that are not in really good shape, those are results of the decay. Those aren't blood/gore effects.
Sandy's final thoughts.
After re-watching Wind in the Willows, not just the TV specials but also the entire Cosgrove Hall series, I've fallen in love with it all over again. I will say time and time again that Redwall was the first anthropomorphic character-centered literature that I fell in love with. And now I can honestly say that Wind in the Willows is my second. After getting reintroduced to the characters and their quirks and personalities, I think we can see these aspects in the personalities of people we see regularly. Before joining the fandom, I think many people would identify or sympathise with introverted Mole, but as time goes on we become more and more boisterous and outgoing like Toad. And as we mature into grey muzzles, maybe we become more down to earth and level-headed like Ratty or Badger. As an adaptation, some material that was left out did become standalone episodes in the TV series like Wayfarer's Hall and Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It also laid down the blueprint for further adaptations to come after it, keeping the spirit of Kenneth Grahame's work alive leading into the 21st century. It's more impressive when you remember that no CGI was used. It's all done with sets, models, practical and lighting effects. It's mostly available on YouTube and there is a DVD box set. If you want an anthropomorphic animal story that's charming, heartwarming, and doesn't talk down to the audience, give this a watch. I promise that you'll find moments that will make you break out in laughter and break down in tears, time and time again. And since we can't really talk about the Cosgrove Hall adaptation of Wind In The Willows without bringing up the TV show, next time on Furry Fandom Stories, I'm going to be ranking them, my top 10 favourite episodes. And that wraps up another edition of Furry Fandom Stories. Remember, if this is the kind of content you would like to see more of, please, by all means, click that thumbs up and smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And as usual, you can follow me on BlueSky at sandybfox.bsky.social, and I'm still on the website formerly known as Twitter at sandybfox. And now for a big announcement, I am now on Instagram! Well, it's just one photo at time of recording this video, but hopefully I will have more on there by the time this video goes live. So if you would like to see more minute details of my sad, uninteresting little life, you can follow me on Instagram at SandyBrushtail. I'm Sandy Brushtail, and I'll see you in the next one for another Furry Fandom story. But until then, take care! What? Do I have something on my face?
Shout! Shout hooray! And let each one of the crowd try and shout it very loud in honor of an animal of whom you're justly proud. When the toad came home, when the toad